Stop translating in your head. Start thinking in English. Have you heard this advice? Are you worried because actually you're still translating in your head and you're not thinking in English, and you're worried you're never going to be fluent? This video is for you because this advice to stop translating in your head and start thinking in English is terrible advice. It is very useless advice. So don't worry about translating in your head or trying to think in English. For me, the language that you speak as your dominant language, your mother tongue, your native language, is kind of like the operating system in your head. And it's a fundamental part of your being. If you've ever tried to change a computer's operating system, you know, it's hard work. It can be done, but it's messy, it's complicated. You need a lot of help with it. So today I want to give you 3 pieces of advice that I think will help you be more useful advice than just think in English. So this advice to think in English has been around for years, but it doesn't have much research to support why you should do this. Scientists, linguists, psychologists, we don't actually know what language looks like in our heads. Bilingual people who are fluent in 2 languages or more report that it depends on the situation if they're translating or if they're naturally thinking in a language. And some people think in pictures anyway, so how do you translate that? So, more useful advice. Number 1, learn English in chunks. Now, I know you've heard this. You should learn English as sentences, as chunks of information, not just individual words. So, for example, with sports, if you're learning tennis, judo, athletics, skiing, do you know the right verbs that go with those sports? So, for example, we play tennis, we do judo, we go skiing, we do athletics. We practice hitting with a tennis racket, but in baseball we hit with a bat. So when you know those collocations, your language will become more automatic. You don't have to think about matching the verb and the noun together. And it helps with all sorts of words as well, not just easy ones like sport. Do you know the word kiln? Kiln is a type of oven for baking clay or bricks. And we don't use bake with kiln, and we don't use cook, but we use fire. So we fire a brick in a kiln. When you know these collocations, you will sound more natural, and you don't need to think about it. Tip number 2 is to learn about the when of phrases. So the study of the meaning of words and how and when and who you should use the words with is called semantics. And something in English lessons that we do touch on a little, but something that you can ask your English teacher more about is, when do I use this phrase? For example, if you're writing an email, "Dear Mr. Smith" is okay for the bank manager. "Hi John" is not really for your bank manager unless you're best friends. So notice when you're reading and watching, listening to English, when people use certain phrases. For example, even good morning. Did you notice that we only use good morning once per day, per person? When you've said good morning to someone and you see them again later in the day, don't say good morning again. They'll think you're a bit crazy, but just say hello. When you leave the office in the evening, in Britain anyway, you don't need to say thank you to each person. You can just say, see you tomorrow. In Japan, it's normal to say thank you for your hard work. So when of phrases can be different depending on the country, on the culture, on the company you're with, or the family or friends that you're with too. Some phrases that are acceptable in one place are not in another. And actually, you know this in your first language too. You know what's appropriate to say to which people when. So this is not a new skill that you need to practice, but you need to keep your eyes and ears open and notice, when are people using these phrases? What do they say for greetings? What do they say when they say goodbye? When you notice these things, again, your English will become more fluent, automatic, and you don't have to think about it at all. And piece of advice number 3, this is about listening. So when you're listening to English, especially rapid English and conversation, do you find you get lost sometimes? Maybe you hear a word, you get stuck because you know that word and you can't remember that word exactly what it means. It can be very stressful to try and think about everything and understand all that's being said. So the advice to stop translating in your head is relevant here, but when you're listening to fluent speech, it's hard to think at all. There's no time to translate, so it's kind of useless advice too. So what can you do when you're listening? I would say listen for general understanding first. Try to catch key words. Now, this depends on how much of the conversation you're understanding. If you're understanding most of it, 70, 80, 90%, focus on the little few words that you're not understanding. Do they make any difference to the meaning? Catch them. Try to think about those words. But if you're understanding very little of the conversation, only 20, 30%, focus on the words that you do know. And then use these keywords to ask more information. So don't just ask, can you repeat that? Because chances are the person will just say exactly the same thing and you still won't understand. So use your keywords to ask questions like, I'm sorry, did you want to know when I did this? Are you asking me how to do this? Did you ask me about my education? Did you ask me about my children? So use the keywords to clarify and get more information. So, how do you feel now? Are you still worried about thinking in English? About training your brain to think in English? If you, instead of training your brain, use these strategies to automate your English so you don't have to think about it at all. So what's your biggest struggle in English? Do let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear it. Thanks very much for watching. I'll see you soon.